Hello, good evening, and welcome to Book 5 of War of the Yokai. You probably noticed that this voice is a little different than the one that's been in the first 4 books, and that would be if you just haven't maybe seen any videos since the last one, that I have finally fixed my voice. So this is what you can expect to hear going forward. Aside from that, there's not much else to talk about. So, let's just get started. Before I do it though, I want to mention, while this is being recorded February 20th of 2022, I have no idea when this is going up. It'll probably be summer before you hear me speaking these words. I'm going to be uploading it tonight though, because guess what? I'm gonna listen to it first. Yeah, this is actually kind of partially for my benefit, so I have something to listen to at work. is it is it narcissistic to listen to your own audiobooks while you're working? Meh, meh, who cares? Anyway, it does help because I get to think of other story ideas. But anyway, this is book 5, The Winds of Change. Written by yours truly. And this is actually the first to have a special thanks. So special thanks to Buff Bunny Mika and Calmest VTuber, both on Twitter. So give them a big ol' thank you for their contributions. Actually, the character of Mika in this book is directly based on Mika from Twitter. So, yes. Anyway, without further ado, don't know why I cracked my fingers. We're just gonna be reading. Let's begin, shall we? Okay. Yes. Once again, Usako found herself on the dream plane, having nodded off to bed mere moments prior. Once again, she found herself in that strange nighttime desert, confronted by the hulking figure of Aramanes. He did this on occasion, taunting, cajoling, or threatening her, only to be battered back every time by the spirit of Tatsuya. It was annoying for sure, but at least it gave the two Takibanas time to chat afterwards about many things. She'd even taught Usako a new spell, a powerful banishment magic that was only to be used in the most dire of circumstances, as there was a chance it could accidentally seal her away as well. Normally not a problem, but without an angel on the other side to unseal the magic, she could be trapped forever. Lately, though, Usako had begun to notice something peculiar about Aramanes. It was as if his body was becoming less and less distinct to her, as though he were becoming a shadow of himself. This time, when he appeared, his tone of voice seemed almost concerned. There's definitely a slight undercurrent of worry in his voice that Usako could just barely pick up on. What was going on?
Usoko, hear me well,
he began.
You have no reason to trust me, to heed the warning I am about to bestow on you. But you must for your own sake, if nothing else.
And you care why? Scoffed Usako, hand on her hip, not even bothering to face him. Look, buddy, we both know how the song and dance ends, so I don't know why you even bother at this point. He laughed, a hollow sound.
Because your well-being, believe it or not, is in my best interest.
Hold on, what did that say? Sorry.
If harm comes to you, or more specifically to your body, to the point I cannot inhabit it, it would be such a waste. Now hear me.
Usako rolled her eyes and sighed, but a part of her realized he was right in a sick and twisted way. His ultimate goal, she knew now, was to possess her body before he was sucked back into the Black Knight stone and sealed away again. The only two Overus left alive that were worth possessing were herself and her father, and he was apparently so weighted down with holy trinkets that Aramanas didn't dare go near him with a 29.5-foot pole. If something were to happen to her, she knew, he would be undone, and while she wasn't about to make that sacrifice, well, suffice to say, she'd hear him out for now. If something was coming that had him this badly on edge, she'd be a fool not to at least listen. "All right, say your piece, and then I'm calling Mom," she replied, placing both hands on her hips. "But hurry up. I want to go see Antarctica, and these dreams are the only way I can right now." The shadowy beast yawned in contempt before continuing.
Soon you will encounter a girl, a child seemingly your own sister's age. This girl will drain your very mind from you. She is what is known as a psychic vampire. The Von Orlok could possibly tell you more of them.
He paused for a moment before opening his palm to reveal the grimoire, bound in what Usako hoped wasn't actually human skin.
I will provide you a spell. Utilize it when you awaken, and your mind will be protected from this child's power.
Usako couldn't help but burst into laughter. "Use a spell given to me by my archenemy, who wants to take over my body, that's gonna protect my mind? Look, I might be 16, but I'm not stupid, big guy. Come on, who do you take me for?" Aramanas was still very unused to being spoken to by anyone like this, being talked down to. He almost felt respect for the Pinkette in that regard, that she had the cojones to act this way towards him. Almost.
You can choose not to believe me,
He finished, allowing himself to fade away rather than be banished this time.
but soon you will see I am right.
"Yeah, and pumpkins will fly out of my ass," mumbled Usako as she returned to her dreamscape. Back in the main chamber of Adamanabad, the being for which the city was named, sat in contemplative silence, his ebon head resting in one of his massive shredder claws. His other claw was dug deeply into the stone throne he sat upon.
My goodwill spurned once more,
He grumbled.
I suppose she cannot be entirely blamed for not believing my words. However, I must make certain that child does not ruin all I have worked towards.
The familiar metallic slithering of Mizuho Kirishima's mechanical tail could be heard approaching, and Aramanes jerked his head over to glare down at the eternally smug Lamia.
What?
He bellowed. "If you're that concerned about the Takibana bitch, just send one of your kids to protect her or something," she replied snidely. "Don't know why it's gotta be her you possess. Couldn't you just trick someone into using your book, becoming Overus, and then boom, possessed?"
If it were that simple,
growled Aramanes slowly.
I'd have done so by now, rather than suffer with the likes of you fools. The book was destroyed by the Von Orlocks, and recreating it now would use more power than I have available. However, You did raise one good point, loath as I may be to admit it.
The great beast stood and extended his arm outwards, claws spread wide as he prepared for a swipe.
Dragon, come here,
he declared, swiping at the air with his claw and opening a rift in space-time, through which Mizuho could see the scantily clad daughter of Aramanas clearly enjoying the vices of the human world a bit too much for her father's liking. With a roar, he seized her and pulled her through the rift before closing it.
What are you doing?
He demanded, holding her uncomfortably close to his face.
You are supposed to be stalking Charles Roland, and here I find you, drinking and making merry with humans.
She removed her yokai crystal and returned to her original state, a pitch-black winged humanoid with great black and orange wings and red eyes that burned like coals. Her name was Dragon. Her given name was Dragon, but she'd adopted the moniker Iris for cavorting about in human society with. Chill, Dad, she replied, rolling her eyes. I'm just getting some recon in, learning more about the humans. They've changed a lot since you got locked away, after all, and Snakebite over there sure isn't much of an expert on 'em. Oh, I have quite the experience with humans, sneered Mizuho, flicking her tail in front of Iris's nose. I know just how to peel them apart, and what bits make the best snapping noises when broken. If you'd like, I can give you a demonstration. Aramanas glared at Mizuho with such intensity that the Lamia thought he might bore a hole through her, and she backed off. Ever since the death of Spriggan, he'd started to act more not protective of his offspring, but with less non-concern for their well-being, such as when Iris had been cornered by street thugs and he'd appeared behind her to shred the punks into flesh ribbons. Sure, she had hardly needed his help in doing so, but he had still done it. Very weird.
I have a new mission for you, daughter,
he rumbled.
You are to ally yourself with Takibana. Befriend her however you can, and protect her from the coming threat. Remember, she needs to be intact physically and mentally if I am to possess her body. I doubt I need say this, but under no circumstance are you to reveal your true nature to her. Understood?
Iris seemed to mull it over for a moment or two, swaying her head back and forth as she contemplated. Understood, Father, she replied with a grin, already working on her backstory. I'm still working on Iris's voice, so if it kinda fluctuates, I apologize. Come on, move it, let's go! It had been a couple days since Usoko's last dream with Aramanas now, and she'd seen no sign of any psychic vampires, aside from Nonami and her telepathy-bestowing talisman. In the 6 months since she'd fought Spriggan in New Atlantis, and Kuriko had been briefly slain, only to be revived by Usoko in a manner that she still didn't understand, the Pinkette had become quite determined to improve herself both physically and mentally. The stronger her body could get, the more power she could put towards her spells and other magic. To this end, she'd hired a fitness instructor named Mika Usagi, a succubus with a talent for knowing how to get anyone on the perfect training regimen due to her own varied experiences over the years. She'd come highly recommended by both Emiko and Rei, who had trained with her in the past, and who were now watching the two spar in the training room at Gardena. The two traded jabs at one another, utilizing several different martial arts, styles in a flurry that, to anyone without knowledge watching, would have seemed random. To those with experience in these styles, however, their fight would have been more akin to ballet. If ballet involved suplexes and strangleholds. As they fought, Mika was keeping her tail and wings tucked in, not using them for their mock fight at her own discretion. Usoko was becoming something of a decent fighter, but she had a tendency to only focus on one aspect of a fight at a time, and was easily faked out. "Yeah!" grunted Usoko, as she took a surprise roundhouse kick to the gut and was sent to the floor. "Always gotta keep your eyes open," called Mika, giving Usoko a helping hand to get up. The pinkette was a bit wobbly and briefly had the wind knocked out of her, but was otherwise okay. If you're having trouble keeping track of forelimbs, someone with a tail is going to have you for dinner. Possibly literally. Still, credit where it's due. You're better than you were when we started. Got a long ways to go, but not bad, kid. She took a long drink from her water bottle before picking up her gym bag and slinging it over her shoulder. This time next week? Usoko, still a little winded by the powerful kick, just nodded and waved as Emiko and Ray made their way down from the bleachers to check on her. "Doing all right there, Uso-chan. That was one solid hit you took," commented Emmy, wrapping an arm around Usoko. The blue Oni was sporting a new look these days. Oh, I just realized something. Oh no, I should have used the updated models for this pic. Sorry. Was sporting a new look these days, changing out her ponytail for a more sophisticated-looking bun. Usoko had also changed her look up a tad. Her hair was now longer by about 6 inches. She'd actually grown a few centimeters taller, and her figure was starting to fill out more. Both girls had recently turned 16, and so had begun learning to drive, something Usoko was excelling at, unlike her girlfriend. Due to Emiko's upbringing, she'd very rarely seen the front seat of a car, let alone gotten behind the wheel. Usoko, on the other hand, had watched her mom intently as a child, and so knew more or less what she was doing. As such, she found herself giving Emiko lessons in their free time. Ray still looked mostly the same as ever, the only difference these days being that she'd grown her hair out long again, and the silver wedding ring on her right hand, after her and Hitomi eloped 2 months prior in June. It had come as a surprise to everyone, including themselves, funnily enough, as it had happened while the two were drunk one night in Las Vegas. But what was done, and they had no plans to annul it anytime soon, or ever, even. "I'm, yeah, I'm good," coughed Usoko. "Damn, she hits hard, huh?" Emiko smiled. It was so good to see Usoko back to her regular self again. For 3 months after she'd returned to Fumizaki, she'd mostly kept to herself, reading through the books Nonami had brought her, as well as the tomes Kwezukan had let her take from her personal library. She'd read them over and over, poring over every last esoteric inscription and arcane glyph, trying to find some clue as to how to wake Kuroko up. The doctors at Gardner had been honest with their prognosis. Her mind had been damaged from both the immense blood loss and being dead for several minutes. It was a miracle she even had brain activity given those circumstances. But if she were to ever wake again, she'd likely be a vegetable, technically awake, but unable to move or communicate. It had been the last text she'd checked, with the green cover and gold cog motifs, that had been the one to finally provide the breakthrough she'd been desperate for. It contained a lost magic known as chronomancy, a magic that could alter the flow of time, speed it up, slow it down, or even reverse it. That was what Usoko knew she had to do. She had to reset Kuroko's body to how she'd been before the fight against Spriggan. So far, she'd had minor successes with the beginner spells. aging a load of bread 2 weeks in a matter of minutes, but she still had a long way to go to become as strong as she needed to be. Fortunately, her successes with chronomancy had caused her cheery self to start coming back, though she was keeping the reason why a secret. From what she was able to gather, chronomancy was lost for a reason, due to its more powerful spells. The time travel spell, especially, which could send a target back into the past, was the likely reason, as in order to travel backwards in time, it eliminated the future you came from, as the very act of going back in time to begin with would create minute alterations which would change the future. In other words, it was a one-way trip, only to be used as a last resort.
I'll say, chuckled Ray, the first time we ever sparred, she, sent me down to the mats, too. Mika definitely doesn't pull any punches, but that's not a bad thing.
By now, Usoko was able to walk again, and made her way over to where she'd left her belongings, including a change of clothes before she had started.
Hey, you mind if I change here?
She asked. Really don't want to have to wobble all the way over to the locker room, you know? Not a problem, Uso-chan, smiled Emiko as both Oni turned away to give the pinkette some privacy. Peeling off her sweat-soaked sports bra, Usoko took a moment to towel off before rehooking her regular bra and putting her yellow t-shirt back on. Once she'd finished, Usoko gathered her things and made her way between the two Oni, hooking her arms between them.
Come on, we gotta hurry, or we'll be late to Hyoka's dress thing.
Said dress thing was the fitting for their dresses for Hyoka's upcoming wedding. She'd asked all of her friends to be part of her wedding party. Initially, she had asked Sarah to be her maid of honor, but the banshee had declined.
Hyoka, darling, I'm honored you choose me to be your maid of honor,
but it's not possible, I'm afraid.
Why?
Asked Hyoka in concern. Had she offended Sarah somehow?
Well, to be a maid of honor, you can't be married, eh?
Replied Sarah. Thing is, I am. Well, was anyway. Haven't seen a no good layabout in decades, and good riddance if I'm being honest. Point is, since I'm legally married, I can't be your maid. Matron of honor, though, now that I can do. Smiling, they had gone ahead with that exact plan. Hyoka then asking Usoko if she'd be the maid of honor instead, something the pinkette agreed to without hesitation, with Emiko, Nanami, and Rei taking the spots of bridesmaids. When they arrived, they found Sarah standing outside the dress store, arms crossed and humming a tune. Wondering where Hyoka and Nanami were, Emiko asked the banshee if she knew after their initial greeting.
Aye, replied Sarah. Nanami's on her way. She got caught in a meeting with Lydia. As for Hyoka, she's inside. Lass asked me to stay here and wait for all of you.
How come? Asked Usoko, slightly irritated that she had to stand in the hot, late summer sun. At least there was shade in the overhang, but she could feel the sweat dripping down her back, and she hated it.
Well, she said it was a surprise, replied Sarah with a shrug. But if I had to guess, I'd say she wants to show us her dress and wants all of us to be there.
As if on cue, the door to the dress shop opened and out stepped one of the employees. Are you at the Kaguri party? She asked. Miss Kaguri is ready for you now, if you would follow me. Usoko was already 2 steps in the door, basking in the sweet air conditioning, when Sarah spoke up.
Actually, we're waiting on one more, miss, she replied politely. We'd rather all be together to see Hyoka and the dress.
Usoko's head slowly turned around, and the pinkette shot a look of fury so intense in Sarah's direction that the banshee practically felt a shiver run down her metaphorical spine.
Which we can, of course, do indoors, come to think, she quickly added.
Usoko's contorted face returned back to normal as she sighed and took a seat against the wall, Emiko plopping down next to her and letting out a small chuckle.
Maybe we ought to look around, Uso-chan,
she smiled, putting a caring arm around the girl's shoulder. "After all, this'll be us someday." Usako laughed awkwardly, planting a small kiss on Emmy's cheek. "Don't you think we're a little young to be thinking about marriage already, Emmy-chan?" True, she had on many occasions planned her and Emiko's dream wedding in her head, mostly as a fun little exercise in how to schedule, but she really hadn't given it any serious thought. They were both still teenagers, after all, and had their whole lives still ahead of them. They hadn't even graduated high school yet, for crying out loud. Even if Usako was sure that Emmy was the one, which she was admittedly pretty sure of, it was still way too far away for her to ever even consider. Still, well, okay. I guess we can maybe plan. I guess we can maybe. Well, okay. I guess maybe we can plan it a little. She smiled. Just little stuff though, like the colors. I'm thinking pinks and blues, 'cause, well, I mean, look at us. Emiko nodded sagely in agreement, laughing softly. Indeed, and perhaps some silvers and golds as well, for flavor. We'd have to have it in Fumizaki, of course. How about 5 Points Park? Usako shuddered. No way, can't do it, she replied with a redundant. Anyway, replied with a shiver. That place gives me the creeps. I mean, you know the story, right? Well, of course, laughed Emiko. Who doesn't in this town? It's only one of Fumizaki's biggest mysteries. The place they were speaking of, 5 Points Park, was by all appearances a regular old park on the west side of town, near the edge of the Tamaru forest. It seemed to be a nice and ordinary park with plenty of room for picnics, a small but all-inclusive playground, and even a pavilion for parties. What made it such a mysterious location were the 5 towering metal structures in the center of the park. To an outsider, they may have appeared to be To an outsider, they may have appeared to be an, albeit gaudy, statuary piece placed there to liven the place up. In truth, however, they had been there since long before even Fumizaki had been founded by Rei's grandfather. Rei's mother, Zasora, had actually been the one to have originally found them. Deep in the woods, and like most people setting eyes on the 5 Points, she was unsettled to her core. The arrangement, 4 in a rough line going north to south, with the 5th in the middle and opposite the first 4, almost resembled a hand reaching out of the ground as if to grasp the sky. No one knew how it had gotten there, or who had built it, and recent geological scans of the area indicated there was much more buried below. However, every excavation attempt was met with disaster or disruption. Tools would go missing, or machinery would mysteriously break down. Even a brand new, fresh from the factory excavator burst into flames during one particular attempt at unearthing, and as such the structure was left alone anymore. It had since become regarded as a local curiosity, a tourist attraction, and nothing more. You know, I actually tried to dig at it a little as a kid, said Usako. It was like, how do I describe it? Have you ever held 2 strong magnets and tried to push their repulsive sides together? It was kind of like that, only my whole body, and I went flying. Ever since then, I've avoided the place completely. All right, so not 5 Points then, frowned Emiko. Odd. When she was a kid and had tried something similar, she'd had no issue, aside from her mother yelling at her for playing in the dirt. She decided not to bring it up. She didn't want Usako to think she was calling her a liar or anything. Finally, after only a few more minutes of waiting, the door opened, sounding a chime. Boom! And in walked Nonami. She'd started wearing her orange hair in a braid again, a look Pieter, her old flame, had loved. He had recently passed away, about a week after Nonami had returned to Fumazaki. She, of course, flew back immediately for the funeral, as well as to introduce her grandson, Martin, to his nocturnal family. Claude, for one, was glad to meet his wait, well, they aren't half brothers. Well, hold on, I have to pause this to figure out what they are. Claude, for one, was glad to meet his nephew, and the two quickly learned they had a shared passion for hunting. Murnau, as well, had taken a shine to the lad, and was getting him up to date on his family's history. Though Nonami's heart was still pained by the memory, she took solace in knowing that she and her love had gotten to see each other one more time before it happened. She, too, now also bore a ring on her finger, silver with an inlaid black diamond, a memento, I can say that, of her late love, and a promise of sorts to herself. "Apologies, all," she sighed, removing her sunglasses and large floppy sun hat. "The meeting took a while because some of the higher-ups wanted to see an example of—" She glanced around for a brief second, noting 3 regular humans in earshot. "My new skill in landscaping. So it ran a bit longer. I hope you haven't been waiting too long." Ray shook her head. "Nah, Emmy and Usoko and me have, only been here for about 10 minutes or so. Sarah was here longer, though, but she came with Hyoka, so, yeah." The aide to Hyoka came forward, clasping her hands together and smiling. Now that it seems everyone is accounted for, please come this way. Ms. Kaguri is most anxious for you all to see the dresses." She led them to the back of the store, behind a red velvet curtain, and there on a pedestal, with one of the staff using the free moment to get measurements of her feet for her slippers, was Hyoka. She looked absolutely elegant in the white and pale blue dress, like a true snow queen. It billowed out past the bottom of the pedestal she was standing on, rippling like a snow-covered field. The pattern on the chest was itself a snowflake, encrusted in sparkling gemstones that matched the colors in the dress. The body of the dress itself started light blue near the top, slowly changing to white by the time it reached her ankles. The gradient was hard to see clearly, but the effect was stunning to be sure. Around her neck was a lace collar, also in a custom snowflake pattern, which covered the exposed upper portion of her chest. Sleeveless, Hyoka's dress instead had blue to white elbow-length gloves in the same gradient as her dress. The veil was probably the most mundane part of the dress, the only bit of note being the odd blue stone inlaid into the center. It didn't look like any gem Usoko had ever seen. It honestly looked more like a super dense chunk of ice. Had Hyoka created it? Who could say? "Well," she stammered, her face the portrait of flustered. "What do you think? Is it too much?" "Not at all," grinned Sarah. "It looks spectacular on you, Hyoka. Fits you perfectly." "I agree," exclaimed Usoko. "Wow, Yo-Yo, it's beautiful. Did you design it yourself?" The Yukiona nodded in excitement. "Miss Pendragon helped a fair bit. She's really good at designing clothes. I mostly just told her what I wanted and she drew it up." "That's Madrid for you," smiled Nonami, recalling how the head of Gardner had recently decided to move to Japan full-time. "Clearly this is where the action is happening right now," she had explained after the 4th return to Fumazaki in regards to an incident involving Usoko or something related to her. This particular incident had been a flare-up of Usoko's new form, the golden-haired six-winged one she'd obtained after the brief death of Kuriko. She'd been in the middle of a routine examination when suddenly she doubled over and gripped her head, screaming. Very quickly had the new form flashed into existence, fortunately without the massive column of light erupting out of her this time. The first time she'd used this form, a golden pillar of light had shot out of her body, through the sea and far into space. Gardna had had one hell of a time covering that one up, especially since an entire cruise ship of people had seen it, and even a few videos had leaked onto the internet. Some people assumed it to be a sign of the end times, others that it surely had a natural explanation, others still claiming it to be proof of aliens. Regardless, when Usoko's new form had flared up in the lab that day, no one present could have doubted her angelic heritage. Though they may have been excused for worrying she might be a demon instead, given the brief rampage she'd gone on immediately after. It seemed her conscious mind had been repressed in the moment, and she was back in New Atlantis fighting Spriggan. At least such was assumed, given she kept screaming for Kuroko and attacking anything resembling a tree. Fortunately, Emiko and Hyoka were present, and the two girls were able to soothe her rage and bring her back to sanity. In light of this, and the previous event as well, Madrid had thusly made the executive decision to move her desk to Gardna, Japan for the foreseeable future, something most everyone seemed to be cool with. Lydia especially, as having her old friend close by to aid Cecily was certainly helpful, as she was currently near the end of her third bimester. Kitten girls only need around 6 to 7 months in the womb, as opposed to the 9 of a human. Thusly, in only a matter of weeks, she would be giving birth to another kitten she and her husband had already named Key, and that's spelled with a C. Because cat pun.
So, grinned Hyoka, are you ready to see your dresses?
Everyone in the group nodded, and Hyoka turned her gaze to the store employee on the other side of the room, nodding once. Immediately, the clerk entered a storeroom and returned a moment later with a rack containing a veritable rainbow of color. Each dress on the rack had apparently been tailor-made for the girls in both shape and design. Do you two mind? The cats. 2 months back, they had all come here to get sized for this day, Ray having given them the most trouble due to her wide frame.
These are gorgeous,
gasped Usoko, holding the shimmering pink material in her hands.
But surely this cost a fortune.
Hyoka?
Well, Sarah actually offered to pay.
Aye, smiled Sarah warmly. Hyoka's the closest thing I have to a daughter in this era, so I'm treating her the way any mother of the bride should and paying for all this stuff. Though the Banshee had been a mother of 2 in her first life, nearly a millennium ago, she'd never really had anyone close enough to her that she felt she could call her daughter. Though that had all changed when she'd met Hyoka. The two may have not gotten off on the best foot, with a Yukiona freezing Sarah solid, but their relationship quickly defrosted and bloomed into a bond closer to family than just friend. That bond had only deepened over the past 6 months, with the two working together on several missions and hanging out together. There were now few people on Earth Sarah trusted more than that little snow woman. Last month, Sarah had finally offered to adopt Hyoka into the O'Malley clan, and the girl completely broke down in tears of joy and happiness. Though she'd opted to keep her last name, at least for now, Hyoka was now a part of Sarah's family, and a lack of last name wouldn't stop her from treating Hyoka as though she were her own kin, something quite clearly evidenced with the quality of the dresses now being put on by her friends.
Hey, Nanami?
Asked a struggling and befuddled Ray from the changing stall next to the vampire.
How does this work?
Utilizing her height, Ray lifted the large piece of fabric over the stall wall to Nanami, who looked at it.
That's the shawl, Ray, she replied. You tie it around like so, and... Here, I'll come show you. Mine's done.
Before Rei had a chance to say a word in protest, Nonami crawled underneath the wall and into Rei's changing station. She instantly regretted this, as the vampire was practically smack up against Rei's washboard abs. The red Oni hadn't even finished putting her dress on yet, and was bare from the hips up. She yelped, Nonami jumped, and in the small space the two collided, which knocked Rei over and through the flimsy door, both girls landing in a panicked heap on the ground. The reaction from everyone was immediate, leaving their stalls to check on the now thoroughly mortified Nonami and the blushing crimson Rei. It goes on like this, Kobayashi, offered Sarah, directing her gaze away from Rei as Emiko threw a nearby towel over her red counterpart's upper half. At last, everyone was in their dresses, and they looked every bit as good as Hyoka had hoped. Sleeveless and matching the girls' respective colors, the dresses weren't much out of the ordinary as far as bridesmaids' dresses were concerned. Each one did have a unique aspect to them, however, as they all bore a small embroidered symbol on the chest that was meant to be indicative of their element: fire, wind, earth, etc. I kind of feel like a princess, giggled Usoko, nudging Emily. Nudging Emmy playfully. Hey, Emmy-chan, what do you think? I think you look wonderful, Uso-chan, smiled Emiko before zipping up the zipper on the back of Usoko's dress. But maybe make sure everything is secure next time. You all look incredible, breathed Hyoka, nearly on the verge of tears. Oh gosh, I can't believe it. This is actually happening. Nonami, having more or less recovered from her previous embarrassment, nodded and asked a question. Will we be allowed to accessorize it at all? As I recall, this is to be an outdoor wedding, and the son and I... Well, you can imagine. That shouldn't be a problem, I don't think, replied Hyoka. Just, please make sure whatever you use, it matches. That's the most important part for me. Usoko grinned, turning to Nonami. I got you covered, Nonami, she said. You just tell me what you need, and I'll magic it up. With my incredible sewing skills, she quickly, if awkwardly, added. It took less time to change out of their dresses than it did for them to put them on, and soon enough the girls were outside the store once more. It was still early enough in the day, and normally Hyoka would have given anything to go hang out with her friends, but she had matters to deal with that far outweighed, at least in her mind, those desires. Though everyone else was going to the arcade to relax and unwind after that eventful moment, Usoko was heading back towards Gardena, her destination the same as it was every day. It was a relatively short trip up the concrete stairwell that led from Gardena's atrium to the medical wing, and fortunately the place seemed to be rather empty today, as the Pinkette's footsteps echoed. This had become a part of her daily routine by now, and so she barely noticed the noise and wasn't even a little winded by the 6-story climb, and soon enough she was surrounded by the sterile, nearly lifeless smell of the medical wing. It was hardly the most inviting place, like a funeral with less hospitality, but Usoko was here every day no matter what, to see a certain someone. Hey, Kuro, she whispered, sat next to the motionless form of her younger sister, Kuriko Takibana. 6 months ago, Kuriko had been killed by Spriggan, and though she had been miraculously revived by Usoko, the younger Pinkette's condition hadn't changed at all. She was comatose, alive but unable to awaken. It was for Kuriko's sake that Usoko was learning chronomancy, to reset Kuriko's body back to how she had been before that day. Usoko pulled the heavy green tome from her bag, as she did every day, closed the door for privacy, and began practicing some of the spells, to the sounds of Kuriko's faint breathing and the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Lydia Nakamoto was feeling absolutely miserable, and it was clearly etched onto her face. She was now well into the final days of her pregnancy, and even though she'd had 2 kids prior to this one, she still was hardly used to it. She was now constantly nauseous. Her whole body had swollen up, and she had to sleep sitting up, which was something her body absolutely did not agree with. Even when she was awake, she was always tired, and she was certainly no longer at the top of her game, which is why she had stepped back to a more desk work position in the organization for the time being. She had enjoyed the field work, especially working with Nonami again, but now... Sarigami, she growled, her ears angled back. Where are those field reports? And where's Cecily? She was supposed to be here an hour ago. Apologies, Mrs. Nakamoto, yelped Aru, who had been promoted from a mere courier to Lydia's personal assistant in the previous month. The reports should be on your desk, though. Perhaps they were buried? As for your sister, well, we know she's here, but she got lost again. Yeah. Lydia sighed, closing her eyes and pinching the bridge of her nose. Oh, typo. It says the bridge of nose. Hold on a sec. She could feel a headache coming on. Sorry, Aru, she said, her tone and body language a bit more relaxed now. I'm just dealing with some stress here, as you can imagine. Would you mind going and finding her? I know it's not your job anymore, but... Oh, it's quite all right, chirped the ape boy pleasantly. I know how Miss Nakamoto can be. It's no problem. As Aru saw himself out of Lydia's office, another familiar face saw her own way in. Modred, carrying a folder. Hey, Marty, smiled Lydia weakly. I don't suppose that in there says that humans and monsters are now living in perfect harmony and we can all go home? Modred chuckled and laid the folder down in front of Lydia. Afraid not, she replied. Quite the opposite, I fear. We've had reports of Dracula harassing some of the locals. Oh, and Frankenstein, too. A Promethean? Asked Lydia, eyes widened in surprise. Didn't expect that. Modred just shook her head, motioning to the folder. No, as in literally Frankenstein. Like from the movies. People are saying they've seen him lurking in the park after dark. Hold on a sec. As for the Dracula sightings, those have more credence. At least 2 young women have been reported with neck wounds matching vampire bite marks. Only, here's the kicker, right? By the time they went to the doctor, the marks were gone. Not healed, but gone. Like they were never there. Modred pushed the folder a little closer to her feline friend. It's all in there. I think Nanami's team should be the ones to investigate. Though, considering the suspected perpetrator, Nanami should probably recuse herself for now. Lydia took a moment to consider Modred's words and to take a gander at the evidence in the folder. Though it contained only one photo of Dracula, and a blurry one at that, it also held a police sketch of their alleged Frankenstein. Lydia had to admit, he definitely did look like the monster from the old black and white flicks she'd seen as a kitten. The question, then, was this some elaborate prank? The Frankenstein could be explained as such easy enough. No, it was the bite marks that had Lydia baffled. They were in the first photo, bloody and quite apparently actual flesh punctures. But in the second image, taken only an hour later, the skin was completely untouched. Now, if the victims had been Oni, such regeneration could be easily explained. But the victims were both 100% pure blood average human. Agreed, replied Lydia after looking everything over. I'll call her in immediately.
She might be able to shed some light on the subject. Though what her cousin is doing here, I couldn't begin to tell you. She stood up slowly from her desk, throwing her leather jacket on and sliding a pair of shades onto her face. "Why are you at it?" asked Modred, tilting her head. "I have a meeting with Usoko," replied the cat girl as she started waddling towards the door. "Weekly special training session. I might not be able to spar with her, but there's other things I'm good at." One of the other things Lydia referred to was her keen ability to keep total control over her emotions at all times. It had been a skill she had learned from a young age, from her former master in the Assassin's Clan. Catgirls, as a rule, tend to be creatures who wear their very passionate emotions on their sleeves, something not well befitting someone in that particular profession, and so she had learned how to keep them under complete control. The reason Lydia was then teaching Usoko this control was very simple. Though no one, not even Usoko herself, knew exactly how this new form worked, it was clear from both instances of its appearance that it was triggered by raw emotion. It was Lydia's hope that she could help Usoko learn to control those same emotions, so as perhaps she could learn to control the new form. It didn't take too long for Lydia to make the short walk from her office to the medical wing. It would have normally taken half the time, but Lydia was moving slower these days, and so had to practically waddle. When she arrived, she could hear someone muttering inside from behind the closed door. Odd. Was it more than just Usoko in there? Usually it was only just the elder Takibana, though each of the girls had been by more than once to check on both sisters. Not wanting to interrupt, Lydia gently knocked on the door. "Usoko, dear." "Usoko, dear," she whispered. "It's Lydia. Are you ready for your training, or do you need a few more minutes?" She kind of turned half British there, sorry. There was an odd sensation that passed through Lydia for the briefest of moments, and then Usoko was standing in the doorway, beaming. "Nope, I'm all set, Mrs. Nakamoto, and thanks again for agreeing to teach me." "Of course," smiled Lydia, subtly glancing over Usoko to see who else was in the room. Other than the Takibanas, it was definitely empty. Who had she been talking to? And how had she been at the door so fast? Lydia couldn't even remember it opening, now that she thought about it. Guess it really didn't really matter right now, she thought, as the two headed out, though not before Usoko kissed her sister on the forehead. Not wanting to risk any flare-ups of Usoko's seraphim form in public, Lydia had been opting to train her in the larger training room in Gardner's basement. It was built from a massive cave that had apparently existed under Fumizaki. Truth be told, the entire city was built over a massive series of tunnels and caves, not all of which seemed to be natural formations. This cave is not a natural formation. That one's for Pen, if you're watching this, buddy. Of course, considering they'd existed for centuries, if not millennia, they would have had to be, right? So many of the caves were interconnected that there had even been an idea to turn them into a subway, but the idea had been killed by Cecily's predecessor's predecessor for unknown reasons. Regardless, upon entering the normally locked training area for the first time a few weeks back, Usoko had been more than a bit taken aback by the sheer size of it. The diameter, as well as the shape, reminded her much of the cavern she'd fallen into on Kaiju Island, where she'd met the mysterious armored warrior she'd dubbed Steve. By now, of course, she was used to it, and immediately she assumed the meditative position Lydia had taught her for her first lesson. "Now, Usoko, today is going to be a tricky one," explained Lydia, sat cross-legged across from Usoko. "We're actually going to try and bring the form out, if possible. Now,
Remember the controls I taught you. Get them ready. Usako nodded, closing her eyes as her breathing pattern changed from regular-sized breaths to large, slow, and deep breaths. Once she felt she was in a good spot mentally, she signaled to Lydia she was ready for the next step. This would be the most dangerous part by far. Now, I need you to focus on that memory. Bring it out to the forefront. Your emotions you felt, every sensation that ran through your body, the feeling of your sister's blood on your face, everything. At the same time, keep your breathing focused, your mind calm. Let the power flow into you without letting it control you. Alright? Ready? There would be no way for Lydia to know for sure, at least not right away. If Usako was successful in this task, if she achieved the golden hair and extra wings without going on a brutal rampage, then she'd know for sure. But other than that... As for Usako, the pinkette was struggling. She could feel the rage building in her from the memories of seeing Kuriko impaled in front of her, of feeling her sister's warm blood splash onto her face, of the terror and confusion etched onto her face as life left her green eyes, of Spriggan's cruel laughter. Regardless, Usako pushed on. Everything she'd heard, read, or been told of this new form suggested it had the power to be the potential to be insanely powerful. So powerful to the point when she might be able to use it. Oh, typo. So powerful to the point where she might be able to use it to augment her chronomancy and wake Kuriko up. One thing at a time, thought Usako, as she gritted her teeth and began to focus harder on controlling herself. Lydia could hear Usako grunting from the sheer force of will she was exerting to keep this power at bay. Finally, though, with a short roar, Usako transformed once more. 4 more wings joined the 2 on her back, and her hair changed from pink to gold. This time, however, her eyes were focused, determined. Usako was conscious behind those eyes now. She'd done it. The question now was, could she do it again? Lydia applauded, approaching Usako as she managed to revert back to her base form and began using another calming technique of Lydia's. "You sure are a quick learner," commented Lydia in faint surprise. "Now try it again. And again." Usako did as she was told, flicking between forms over the course of the next 10 minutes. It got a little easier every time, but Usako knew she couldn't use this in a fight just yet. Sure, she could control her emotions here, when no one was attacking her, and it was only Lydia. It would be quite something else to be able to retain full control in the middle of a battle. "I'm impressed, Usako," stated Lydia, as Usako powered back down to normal one last time. "You've come a long way in such a short amount of time. It's incredible." "I'm just a quick learner, like you said," laughed Usako awkwardly. "I guess now the question is, where next from here? Am I ready for combat training?" "Not yet. Not quite yet," responded Lydia. "Your progress is impressive, yes. But if Mika's still giving you trouble in your base form, then you're not ready for more advanced training." "I see," was Usako's reply. Odd, she didn't sound nearly as disappointed as Lydia had expected. She was expecting at least a little bit of questioning. Well, maybe she just matured quicker than expected, thought Lydia as the two went through a few more exercises before they finished the day. It had been almost a year since the Pinkette had been tossed head first into this world, and it was evident that she'd been growing up rather quickly because of it. be it things that happened to her, like Emi's attack, Nanami's impalement and later decapitation, or Kuriko's death. Usako had been through a lot. And that wasn't even counting the constant assault on her mind by Aramanes, something she'd only confided in with Lydia and Nanami. I can't imagine what it must be like. Having someone constantly trying to take over your body, your mind. This kid's tougher than she looks. Deciding to treat Usako, since she'd made such progress today, Lydia took the Pinkette to her favorite ice cream parlor, neither aware of the situation beginning to unfold on the opposite side of town. And not only is that a good stopping point, we're right at an hour. So, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. This is just the beginning of Winds of Change. I don't really have any outro things to say. I don't know where we'll be with the VN when this goes up eventually, or goes public eventually. So, if it's on Steam, go check it out. If we're still looking for people, we're still looking for people. Hopefully, because this is going up in the summer, so hopefully we're not still looking for people. But you never know. I'd imagine by now we'll have a what's it called? A demo at least out. So, assuming it's out, I'll be putting a link in the description. Assuming I remember to do that. If there's no link in the description, either there's no demo or your girl forgot. In which case, please leave a comment letting me know I forgot. If you don't mind, I mean. So, until part 2, y'all have a good time, good night, good day, whatever it is. Have a good one. Don't get used to this picture. I'm going to change it up a little bit for the next one because this was supposed to be their updated models. Y'all have a good time. Take care. Sayonara.